The following story has been brought to you by StoriesToInspire.org.
There was a fellow, unfortunately, who went through the war, and at the end of the war, he'd lost everybody in his family. He was so angry and he was so bitter that he decided he's leaving, he's walking away from everything that he knows, from his community, from Judaism. He's going to go and fly and move somewhere else because he was angry at God, that God took not only his family, but the very last person alive in his family was his young son, and he lost his son in the concentration camps. He decided that's it, he's out. He moves to South Africa. Anyway, years and years go by, and he marries a non-Jewish woman, builds himself a nice non-Jewish family, does very, very well for himself. Years and years pass, and some crazy way, something absolutely nuts happens until the man decides he's going to go to Yad Vashem, and as he types his name into Yad Vashem to see if they have his family on file, he sees his son's name, Yosef, and it says alive, and it says in Israel. And there's contact details. And he cannot believe what he's looking at. He literally is about to break down emotionally. He closes, he just runs out of the place, makes contact, and actually realizes that his only son is alive. They have a tearful reunion. They can't believe all the time that they've missed. 50 years have gone by. The guy has family, children, grandchildren. He's religious. He's living in Israel. And he says, I want to invite you, to come down to South Africa to see me, to meet up with me. Anyway, my friends, in the story, what happens is a true story. When the fella goes back home, he tells his family about his newfound son. They can't believe it. They're a little bit, kind of thrown by all of this. That part of his life was never part of their life. They're not Jewish. They don't necessarily relate in the same way. And they decide that, the time will come. Time's come for the family to meet the family. Unfortunately, before his son Shimon is able to go visit his father, Yosef Joe, the man passes away. And he leaves a fortune of 15 million pounds or dollars or whatever it was. And he decides to split it between his son from the Holocaust and his son from this non-Jewish woman living in South Africa. Anyway, the family can't believe it. The boy calls the family, says, what are the funeral arrangements? I'm going to come, I want to fly down there right away. And there's kind of a little bit of a cool response, you just came into the family over here, and now you're getting half of the inheritance, et cetera, et cetera. They're kind of a little bit resentful of this guy, is Johnny come lately. And he says, well, the funeral is going to be on this and this day. We're arranging it, in our local church. And the cremation is going to happen in wherever. The boy says to his stepbrother, he says, please don't cremate him. Please, if there's any way that he can have a Jewish burial, any way, it would mean so much to me. And the man says, listen, I know that you 50 years ago were his son, but he hasn't had contact with you in so long. We're his family. We've lived with him all this time. He lived a non-Jewish life. We're not Jewish. This is our pastor or our church. This is what we're doing. I'm really sorry. You don't get to come into our life and tell us what to do with our father. But he says, but he's my father too. And they say, well, we've made the arrangements already. If you want to come, you're welcome to come, but this is what's happening. And the boy is begging, please, please, please. Anyway, nothing doing. He flies down to South Africa. He's going to give his last chance. He comes to his brother and he says, please do me a favor. He says, I need to speak with you before the funeral happens. He says, he goes, I can't tell you. This means so much to me. He says, both of us, the two of us we were in the Holocaust. They were burning us and putting us in ovens back then. To escape from that, only to wind up in another oven, to me is the craziest thing in the world. Please, you must allow us to give him a proper Jewish burial. I'll take care of everything. The boy says, nothing doing. Finally, the son from Israel says, I'll make you a deal. He says, I will give up my entire portion of the inheritance if you let me take the body and bury it according to Jewish tradition, the right way. The guy is looking at his brother, $7.5 million, right? Instead of having his father be cremated, instead he's going to bury him. He sees the way his brother's speaking. He says, fine. Take it, he says, but we don't want to ever hear from you again. They sign whatever papers they sign, and he gives them the body of his father, and he brings his father to a Jewish burial after all those years. Someone, after the funeral, came to this man and said, you know, you haven't seen your father in 50 years. You get this inheritance of all this money. You're able to walk away from it for one mitzvah. When was the last time you spent $7.5 million on a mitzvah? And the man said something that I'll never ever forget. He said, you know, my whole life, I never had the chance to do any kibud av va'em to honor my father. I never had a chance to get him a cup of water. I never had a chance to, take him to shul. I never had a chance to get him a birthday card. I never had a chance to get him a present. He says, I only just met my dad. And he said, and the only act in my entire life of honoring my father was to make sure that he had a Jewish burial. He said, that to me was worth more than anything.
Enjoyed this story? Come again. Bring a friend. StoriesToInspire.org